puts me at ease.
Yeah, isn't it? They're comfortable. I'm live. Okay. Well, hey, good evening, everybody, and good evening, everybody online. My name's Patrick here from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and it's a real treat to have these two authors with us here tonight, J.D. O'Brien and Jim Ruland. They have two of the best crime novels and the most different crime novels. And I'm always looking for something fresh and different. And there's a whole group of writers these days that are kind of rewriting the crime novel, especially the LA crime novel. And so please help me give these guys a nice warm Scottsdale welcome. Yeah. And you know, it's funny, I didn't make the connection until later, but Jim has also written a number of books on the subject of punk rock, which those of you who know me, near and dear to my heart, including Story of Bad Religion, you know, seminal LA punk band. And, you know, my 13-year-old self, we were talking about this, was their album, How Could Hell Be Any Worse, was just a very important record for me. And so we're nerding out on punk rock before we got started here. But gentlemen, I think, I understand that you guys have known each other for quite a while. They drove over from LA today, and I'll put some questions your way, but I'm going to kind of leave it in your hands if you'd like to talk to each other about your books, if that works.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So we drove here from LA and it took a little over 6 hours, so we had plenty of time to warm up our act. Before we start, I just want to say hello to my daughter, who, if she ever is cool enough to watch this.
Is she tuned in now? Or is
If
she?
she's, I don't know. I don't know. But I just want to say hi, Annie. I love you. And on with the show.
On with the show.
So we were trying to figure this out in that I had Joe started a zine called Flop Sweat.
Yep.
And a little self-published zine. And
Yeah, it was kind of it kind of focused on bad comedy, you know, bad, you know, one-liners and, you know. And so naturally I thought of Jim. Here we go. We got it.
yeah. Well, yeah. And so, and I think I had maybe recently come back from Ireland or Northern Ireland and heard some like very off-color jokes from some Irish folks. And so like I sent them in. And so I was in the first issue of the zine.
Yep.
And then maybe a year later, my first book, a short story collection, that has many of the stories that I wrote when I was a student at NAU up in Flagstaff, came out. And Joe was living in Portland, and so I asked Joe if he would read with me at this, what was it
It
called?
was Reading Frenzy. I don't know if it's still there. It was like a little zine bookstore.
And it had like the greatest poster ever.
It did. I still have it. Yeah.
Like I had written, one of the things I like to do, especially in short stories, is take a figure out of pop culture and then put him someplace else. So I kind of examine like, well, how did Popeye lose his eye? Or what if Dick Tracy went to Mars on a space mission? Or what if Little Red Riding Hood was set during Nazi Germany? You know, things like that. And so the poster was like Popeye in like a detective hat, and I was like, you know what? I should get a tattoo of Popeye the detective because I loved it so much. But there were about 10,000 more people at that, or 10,000% more people here tonight than there were at that event.
Yeah. Well, I pulled the hometown 2 or 3 people, I think.
Two.
Yeah, 2. It was, no, you're right. It was
a couple, so it really counts.
The other
as one.
person worked there. Yeah. So,
So that was the start of our friendship, but we went out and commiserated, and just hit it off. We liked a lot of the same music, same books, and we've kept in touch. And now fast forward to the lockdown of the pandemic, and we had like been in touch over the years. We briefly lived in LA at the same time. But you were in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, yeah. I live in Western Massachusetts.
Were you in the town where you grew up or near it?
Near it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up there and then moved back there about 10 years ago.
And I was living in San Diego and had a pretty tight deadline for another punk rock book called Corporate Rock Sucks, and was doing a lot of research and stuff. But at night, we both discovered that we had these novels that had been languishing for a long time. His started out as a screenplay, mine started out as a novel, and then I thought it would be a good idea to turn it into a TV series. And now I learned all these things, and now I needed to turn it back. So we were adapting our novels from these scripts back into books, and it's kind of the thing, like a little project maybe that a lot of people did, like learn how to sew or make bread, but
Yeah.
but very improbably 3 years later, we're celebrating our books. So
Yeah. Yeah. Because
So we did it.
Yeah, we swapped chapters, and yeah, and it was right around the same time too. We finished, and yeah, it was. And they are different books, but they're both L.A. crime novels, as Patrick mentioned. They're both multiple points of view, present tense. So I mean, they have things in common, but we were able to usher each other through the finished product. I think Jim helped me more than
Music
I
is a
helped
good-
him.
Music is a good through line.
It's
Actually,
true.
'cause
That's
there's a lot of
another-
music
yeah.
in both books. Very.
More country music in mine, and punk, and
well, why don't you
And
talk
Jim.
about Harry Robotor a little bit, the protagonist of your character, and
yeah, Harry Robichaud is he is a bail bondsman in Van Nuys, which is kind of up in the San Fernando Valley. It's kind of a dingy offshoot of Los Angeles, and he's
where the Brady Bunch was filmed.
yeah, I didn't know
Is
that.
that right?
I didn't know that. But the
It doesn't look like that anymore.
and Harry's in the 70s. Harry was like a rhinestone cowboy, kind of in the era of Graham Parsons, and he was had a brief flash in the pan as kind of a cosmic stoner country singer, and then he over the years he ends up a bail bondsman in Van Nuys, but in his mind he's still kind of in 1973, with his nudie suit on and his so he
This group was called the Lusty Men.
the Lusty Men, after there's a Robert Mitchum movie about rodeo riders called The Lusty Men. So he kind of carries that spirit through, to be kind of an anachronistic character in modern day.
Andy also smokes a lot of pot.
He smokes a lot of pot. I made the mistake of looking at Goodreads the other day, and somebody said, because the whole point of it's like Cheech and Chong or something, and then somebody said, I find his pot use a little excessive.
Just kind of the point, right? It
Yeah.
becomes,
Yeah.
if you have a bail bondsman who's like looking for people and they're smoking a lot of weed, well,
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of diversions along the
Yeah,
way.
we call it a lukewarm pursuit.
This one working? This
And the protagonist of Make It Stop could not be more different in that respect. And
Oh, yeah, it is. Okay.
I need to set the scene a little bit in that Make It Stop is a LA crime story, but it's set in the near future. And by near future, I mean like maybe 10 minutes into the future, or kind of like a Black Mirror. But there are things that are different and things that are the same. And one of the things that are different is that because of these new policies, if you check into a hospital and you don't pay your bills, you don't get to leave. And these policies are being rolled out in places like, detox units, alcohol rehab centers, mental health facilities, places where people are extremely vulnerable and need help. And so in this very dystopian corporate draconian nightmare world, they're being absolutely preyed upon. And so our heroes of the book, Melanie Marsh, I forgot to bring Melanie. I had an action figure of Melanie Marsh made, and but Melanie is she works for a dysfunctional vigilante outfit called Make It Stop, and what they do is they go into these prison hospitals and they bust people out. And so that's kind of the world that the whole thing takes place in. So you have a lot of the reason why Melanie is so good at her job is because she is also a recovering alcoholic, and her fatal flaw is that she feels like when she goes undercover into a rehab facility or one of these places, she always gets wasted. So she relapses so she can do her job, because nobody goes to rehab sober. is her thinking. And so she already puts herself in an even more vulnerable position. And so um, that's it's on the opposite side of the struggle with substance abuse, and that's Melanie's predicament.
In both these books, they're great ensemble casts, very memorable characters. But yeah, I mean, there's so much going on in both of your books. I mean, but you talk about sort of the recovery industrial complex, and it is terrible. And in the afterword of the book, you talk about some of the things that inspired you to write this book, and you said it in the near future. Is this thing working? Seems to be. But that reality kept catching up with you, and the future kept, appearing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, it took me a long time to write this book, so let's just go right to my shame spot, right? But it was like I highly recommend that if you're going to write a book set in the near future, that you write it quickly, because otherwise all your great ideas will start happening, and they won't be near future; they'll be the past. And like one of those things is that I gave everybody in the novel, like when smartphones were starting to come online and become ubiquitous, I gave everybody something called a tab, and they come in all these different shapes and sizes, and they're basically the same thing, except they're like a powerful computer that seldom need to be charged. And so like they might be like the size of a phone, they might be like on a desk, and they might be like in your car, so there would be like dash tabs. And this was like before like Tesla had even thought about making an electric car. And now like all cars have fucking iPads right on the dashboard. And I don't make a cent off any. No, I'm kidding. I mean, so it's just kind of like the way that, kind of like when you read like Philip K. Dick now, which was so cutting edge, and his thinking and his ideas really are, but sometimes they can feel really dated, the language and the technology, and so I kind of feel like I dated my book before it even came out.
So you can read it. It's we have some members of a discussion group, the Hard Boiled discussion group that we've done for 2 years here at the store, and we've gone John right now at the Hammets and up through that pulp era, kind of meandering back and forward, and both of your books would be perfect for our group to read. Yeah.
It's kind of funny. We were talking about this, maybe not in this context, and you can tell me if you agree or not, but like Melanie is more like a Dashiell Hammett character, and Harry's more like a Raymond Chandler character. Wouldn't you say?
I would agree.
Yeah.
We were saying he just Jim just saw James Elroy at the book festival, and I guess he said something to that. But I would say the opposite. I prefer Chandler to Hammett, but you and Elroy are the opposite.
Yeah, Elroy was pulling no punches as usual, and he said that Dashiell Hammett's detective, he was writing about the man he was afraid that he was, meaning himself. And you can see that because, I mean, the guy was a Pinkerton, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, according to Elroy, Chandler was writing about the detective, the man he wished he could be.
So I wish I could be a 70-year-old stone. And,
And I hope I'm not a fascist. Yeah, something.
Well, there's, are you guys James Crumley fans? Here,
one of my absolute favorites.
and this, Zig Zag is, there's so many things. It's a once a classic California, although it goes out of Arizona, meanders around. It's a great road book. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the tone of The Last Good Kiss, sort of elegiac. He goes from bar to bar throughout the entire West. Crumley came here a couple times, by the way. Yeah, got some good stories. Yeah, but where's it going?
I'm happy with what you've already said.
Well,
I went looking for James Crumley once in Missoula. I heard that there was a local bar that he was was a fixture at, and when I was driving cross country moving to Portland, I spent an afternoon prowling around looking for him, and I
Couldn't find him.
find him.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about your kind of cast of characters that kind of live around the bar. And Fuzzy is the bartender, memorable, and his son gets into some hijinks that sort of starts this classic LA crime novel plot that you kick in.
Yeah, well, this is sort of what I touched on a little bit earlier with the anachronistic aspect. That the bar, the Blue Grotto Lounge, is sort of a place that's like frozen in time, where Harry and his ilk kind of hang around. And I don't know, I think the law has changed, but I took some liberties where there used to be a law in Los Angeles where owner-operated bars could still allow smoking indoors. If you had no employees. And so Fuzzy has that arrangement, which is primarily why Harry's around there. He's Harry, so it's but it's really just kind of your classic, Cheers, but just at a much
A lot more depressing.
yeah. And so Harry's and yeah, when Fuzzy's son gets into trouble, he's kind of coerced by his girlfriend into robbing a marijuana dispensary in Van Nuys. So
What could go wrong?
yeah, with all the brains of that operation, and so out of loyalty to Fuzzy, and also to offset some of the bar tab, Harry kind of reluctantly, gets off the stool. They end up, it's a, as I said, a warm pursuit sort of through the Mojave Desert. They go to Joshua Tree, to the Barstow area, and eventually to Calico, which is an old western coast, right there.
I think another writer that we both have an affinity for, in terms of like having these large casts and but maybe more shorter, chapters broken into modular scenes, is Barry Gifford.
Oh yeah.
That we're both like huge fans of Barry's work.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about the bail bondsman or bail bonds profession. I didn't realize, did you guys know that the only two places that it's legal, is that in the world, are the United States and the Philippines? I had no idea.
Yeah, and I know here they've tried to. They're in some states, like in where I live in Massachusetts, it's illegal, I believe. But
Really?
yeah, in certain, and I think they've really tried to, because it is. It's very. I mean, you see a little bit of it in the book. It is very predatory business, and I did a little bit of research for bail bondsmen, mostly just interviewing and stuff. But I think Jim and I talked about this in the thing that he did for his newsletter. But there was somebody told me that the best way to find out about how bail bonds works is to call and pretend that you're trying to bail somebody out of jail or that you need help, and then you'll see how really kind of what they'll do to to get you. And I just am not a good actor. I crumbled. Like I said, I think to be a bail bondsman, you really need a good bullshit detector, and they picked up on it right away.
Well, there are actually two bail bondsmen, which I really love in the book, and they have very different. One of them's much more of the Better Call Saul of bail bondsmen. Benches and stuff, and they have this sort of, I would hesitate to call it a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's kind of like, did they not speak for a year or two, and then they get back and just bust each other's balls incessantly throughout the book.
And they're rivals and hang out at the same bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. And then, but yeah, Harry's philosophy. His name's Rick. The guy. He has his big feature. He's got a limousine, a rat's limousine. So you call him, you get picked up from jail in a limousine, which is a nice touch. But that's the real thing in Van Nuys. But yeah, Harry thinks Rick is a hot dog. And Rick Harry doesn't consider himself a hot dog. So. But he is very Better Call Saul kind of.
Right. Absolutely. You guys talked, I mean, can we hear a little bit of the book? Would you guys like to read a little bit for us?
Sure.
Would this be a good time for the reading portion?
Sure.
Yeah.
You want to go first? Jim?
Sure thing.
All right.
I have it I already set up about Melanie, how she goes undercover in these rehab facilities, but when she goes in, like she goes in red hot, right? And, under the influence, but she has to eventually sober up, and there she is in rehab. And yeah, she's on a mission, but she's also there for a reason. So it's a time for some reflection. Melanie is skeptical. She's skeptical of her group leader's cheerful optimism, the earnestness of the other addicts on her ward, the empathy the nurses ooze every time one of them asks if there's anything they can do. You can get out of my face with that fake bullshit, she thinks almost constantly during her first week at Evergreen. But then she grows skeptical of that too. She's skeptical of the fluorescent lights, the high traffic carpet, the thrift store sofas. She's skeptical of the institutional coffee and sugary sheet cake doled out to celebrate milestones that are as insubstantial as the pink frosting she scrapes off the top, but eats anyway. She's seen it so many times before, and she doesn't need to see it again. Besides, she isn't going to be here long. She's skeptical of Lauren, who is too pretty to be so insecure. She's skeptical of Jeremy and his white boy dreads and declarative tattoos. She's skeptical of Shauna's homelessness, of which she seems a little too proud, and she doesn't feel bad about any of it. The second you stop being skeptical around junkies, they've got you. She's skeptical of the urge to underline passages in the material Shalanda passes out during group. She's skeptical of the compulsion to write her feelings down in the journal with Evergreen Medical Center stamped on the cover. She's skeptical of the searching questions she poses to the constellation of glow-in-the-dark stickers a previous rehabee stuck to the ceiling above her bed in the women's dormitory. She's skeptical of the war stories people tell during group. She's skeptical of their highs. She's even more skeptical of their lows. She's skeptical of the words that tumble out of her own fool mouth when she swore she wasn't going to say anything. She's skeptical of the tears that spill down her cheeks after an intense share, the hugs that convulse her. She's skeptical of her diminishing skepticism. What happened to the cynical chick that strolled in here, mad-dogging anyone who tried to make eye contact with her? She's skeptical of laughter. She's skeptical of sleep. She's skeptical of the pleasure she takes from the pancakes drowning in syrup. And not just because she's skeptical of the syrup. She's skeptical of the hours that go by without thinking about make it stop. But mostly, she's skeptical about God. After 2 nights in detox, Melanie was taken to a mandatory group session. Still exhausted from her rampage at the beach, she drilled holes in the floor with her eyes, arms crossed, giving off her best "don't fuck with me" vibe, when someone started talking about God. The guy spoke in a voice so tender she thought it had to be a put-on. This was precisely the kind of corndog shit she would have laughed at the last time she went to rehab for real. She looked up to see which one of these lame asses was getting heavy with the God trip. And there was this tall, skinny native kid looking right through her sneering condemnation, like she wasn't even there. This was Morris. He wore big, goofy glasses and a sawed-off leather jacket studded with so many buttons, patches, and spikes, it looked like armor. He had long hair that he wore in a braid, and when he talked during group, he got a dreamy, faraway look in his eyes that didn't seem to fix on anything. Morris was always going on about God, only he didn't say God. He said Creator. The first time she heard him say it, something clicked in Melanie's brain, or maybe someplace deeper than that. When Perry, the group discussion leader, pushed Morris to explain what he meant, Morris smiled and said, "The light behind the sun." And Melanie nearly keeled over. The word God came with too much baggage, and higher power was too accommodating to really mean anything. was just so played out. But the light behind the sun, the bang at the beginning of time, the primal spark in the universe, she could get down with that. That night, when the lights clicked off in the dorm, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling lit up with unusual potency. She'd had stickers like these when she was a kid. She was fascinated with the sky, how dramatically it changed from day to night. After a rare sleepover at the house of a friend whose parents had set up a tent in the backyard, Melanie asked to do the same thing when she got home, spend the night outside gazing up at the stars. Her mom was opposed to the idea, but compromised by buying Melanie the stickers with her employee discount at the drugstore where she sometimes worked. Melanie pestered her for weeks to put them up, and when her mom finally got around to doing it, she ignored the constellation map that came with the package and arranged the stars according to her own design. Melanie could still see her mother perched on a stepladder, wine glass in hand, mapping out the cosmos according to her own drunken whim. Melanie was too young to know the difference, but it worked. When the lights went off at night, the stars ignited, pouring cosmic light into the room. That's what Morris's words do for her. They let light into a very dark place. She decides she's going to keep an eye on him, see what he's all about, even though she isn't going to be here long. Thank you.
Side note, Morris, what's
This is a quiz. Res Erection.
that?
That's a good one. So I already talked about Harry a bit, so I think I'm going to introduce you to Capri, who is kind of the one who gets this whole thing started. She's the girlfriend of Ted, the son of Fuzzy, who kind of convinces him to rob the dispensary. But this is her kind of what kicks everything off. Capri Doll works at the Big Smoke dispensary on Hazeltine Avenue. She has an idea to rob the Big Smoke dispensary on Hazeltine Avenue. The idea came 2 weeks into the job, the day she realized the security camera didn't work. 2 weeks after that was when Eddie, the manager, gave her a key to the place. Now it's week 5 and the idea is forming into a plan. Each shift she's worked has gone by slower than the one before. The constant throb of bass, the stale air overcast with vape clouds, losers on the beat-up couches ripping bong hits and playing video games. Carvel, the security guard, is always mooning like a mental patient at his gun magazines. Days when she smokes along with everyone else, most days, it drags even more. Her boyfriend Ted acts like it's some dream job she has, standing there for shit pay while someone else makes all the real money. Capri watched her mother work shit jobs all her life, just so they could live in shit apartment complexes, ride around in shit cars, and scrape together enough money to pay the past due amount on bills to avoid shut-off every month. And where did it ever get them? It's a sucker's game, and she'd rather die than live that life. She thought porn might be an easy exit plan, but it's even hard to make money doing that anymore. During webcam shows, she'd get a rush hearing the dinging of the tips coming in, like items being rung up in a supermarket, but it never added up to much. It was like that hopeful second when multiple cross lines light up on a slot machine before you realize you've only won like $10. It's only 11 o'clock, but it feels like it's at least 3. She tries to distract herself by watching the movie everyone's howling at, some hip-hop pot comedy they watch every other day. But the only way she can endure another second here is to spend every one of them plotting her escape. She has most of it figured out. Carvel, the security guard, is the only wild card. Something's off about him. He's always staring her down. She's not sure if he's suspicious of her or if he's just another leering pervert. He doesn't say much, but he's an overreactor. The slightest issue with a customer and he's in full defense mode, like he's looking for an excuse. She runs it down in her head again. Big Smoke is a strip mall hole in the wall, so it's not like it'll be a massive score. But if she does it on the right day, she could walk away with at least $50,000 worth of product. Thursday afternoon, they're finally getting the big Acapulco gold delivery. It was before her time, but the last batch apparently had a THC count in the high 30s and sold out immediately at 60 an eighth. A friend of Eddie's down in Hermosa has a connection to some old-time grower in Mexico, one of the only people who can match the original strain. A couple times a year, if they're lucky, some will make it up the coast, and Eddie will grab as much of it as he can. A large amount is supposed to be coming this time, along with the usual delivery of the supplier's other strains. It all arrives at the end of the day Thursday, so they won't put it out until the next morning. Fridays and Saturdays are the busy days, so Thursday night would be the time to do it, before it's even unpacked. Today is Wednesday, so that means tomorrow.
Dun, dun, dun. You really don't get a sense of what a hardcore sociopath Capri is in that.
Not
scene.
yet. Yeah.
So did you, well, I hate to say, did you do a lot of research into dispensaries in the Los Angeles area?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's changed a bit, but there were definitely spaces like that that were definitely not legal. I think now it's cannabis is all very on the up and up, and it's very, it's almost like going to Starbucks or something now. But, I based it on when I lived in Van Nuys maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and there was definitely still those kind of places where somebody just rented a little, in a strip mall where, clearly not, not fully legal.
strip malls, payday loans,
Yes.
massage parlor, probably
So you've been to Van Nuys.
a nail joint.
Check cashing.
Check cashing. That's the thing I was talking to Jim too. That's one of the real attractions of Van Nuys is Louis Liquor and check cashing. If you're ever up in the area, yeah.
Yes, literally and figuratively.
About make it work, about the organization itself, because it's interesting the way you have it kind of, there is sort of a structure to it, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. The guy, is it Trevor, who is Melanie's case manager? You call him. Talk a little bit about make it work.
Okay, so the organization Make It Stop was established by a guy named Doyle, who had his own struggles with alcohol, and then when the guy that got him clean and sober relapses, he goes to get him out of trouble and finds that he signed one of these conditional release documents, and so he can't leave. And so Doyle is like, "Yeah, we can. Let's go." And so there's kind of this double-edged sword to Doyle's personality that kind of matches my own. And I'm a veteran of the Navy, but also like hugely into punk rock. So like on one hand, I'm a rule follower. I hate to be late for things. I like a plan. If you give me a plan, I like to stick to the plan. But then on the other side, if you say, "Hey Jim, this is what we're doing today," I'm like, "Fuck you." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, just kind of slipped out. Like, don't tell me what to do, please." So, so yeah, I think that's part military, part raised Catholic, part character flaw, or defect. But so Doyle, back to the organization, is that he kind of lays this kind of military hierarchy, just in a very loose sense, and everyone just kind of adheres to it, even though they have no real military training. And I only wanted it to be like, it's only an organization in the sense, like all organizations really, as long as everybody believes it's an organization. And so like one of the rules is like no fraternizing, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the 12-step program. It's like when you get sober, and I've been in recovery for 14 years, they advise you not to like start new relationships for the first couple of years, because things get messy, especially when you're two newly sober people are trying to figure things out. So naturally, Melanie falls for her case manager, and things get messy. And it's kind of, there's like a lot of people wandering in and out of the organization, and it's always kind of on the move. Right now, they're like in a like old yoga studio in in the Sherman Oaks Galleria, just because, you know.
And there's also some neat little details, like it's not, when they go to a baseball game, they're going to see the Los Angeles Exxon Dodgers
Oh, right. Yeah.
versus the, what is it, the Raytheon Padres.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, so there's an added layer of corporate
Yeah.
to
And
everything.
it was really, I mean, I had like little elements like that throughout the book, and I wasn't really sure how I felt about it. But then, fairly late in the 10-year process of, you know, writing and revising and getting my shit together on this book, I watched the movie Fight Club. And what's the thing we all remember about Fight Club? Right. I was going to say Brad Pitt's beautiful body, but it's kind of the same thing. But when I was rewatching it, I was struck by Project Mayhem, and I was like, "Oh my God, where's Project Mayhem, and why haven't they blown up Fox News yet?" And I have kind of a theory that if Fight Club hadn't come so close to 9/11, where speculating about how cool it would be to blow things up became very not cool to do in public or on the internet or on airplanes or anything like that, then maybe someone would have taken out Fox News by now, kind of like Project Mayhem had, you know, like, um, so I wanted this book to take place in a world where there were other vigilante groups operating, and sometimes they cross paths in good ways, and sometimes not so good ways, you know, operating at, you know, common and cross purposes.
How much can you say about there's a new drug in town, of course. Everybody's hearing about called bliss, bliss. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, I always like books where the writers make up a drug, and because then I can say, man, I'd like to try that. And there's no guilt associated because it's a make-believe drug, right? Like, I'm not really going to go out and take this. I can't do it, right? I can only dream about it. So, but like, I think when I came up, bliss is supposed to be like, kind of like a mix between, you know, ecstasy and a synthetic opioid. And fentanyl was just coming on the scene, but I think at one point it just was already so much stronger than my make-believe drug. But the whole idea is that, do you guys remember when there was a drug in Russia they were calling crocodile, and people were kind of manufacturing it out of drugs so were readily available from 24-hour pharmacies throughout Russia? And what would happen is, if you make this drug and then shoot it up, terrible, terrible things would happen to you, because you're not supposed to put these drugs and take them intravenously. And people were losing limbs, and all kinds of horrifying things were happening, kind of like worst case scenario for someone, you know, with a bad, you know, addiction involving needles. And so I kind of wanted that to be the case, where this drug is being made on purpose to harm people. And it's being rolled out. Well, I won't spoil who or why, but it's a very nasty, nasty drug. And it's once you get addicted to it, you give off an odor that other people with experience in it can detect. Sounds wonderful, right? Let's go try it tonight.
Yeah. I will add before, but in addition to the made up drug, Jim is known for having made up liquors. And you have Chadwick's Unadulterated, which I believe I've only seen in the fiction of Jim Ruland, and Fiery Cat Jalapeno Vodka, which doesn't exist outside of your pages either.
I do have a Fiery Cat tattoo. So this is what a bottle of Fiery Cat would look like, you know. So, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're almost there.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about so they hit the road. He steals. What car does he steal? He steals a Toyota Yaris.
Yeah, that was a joke at my own expense. I drove a Toyota Yaris for years. It was just it was a punchline. People just for some reason really just shit all over that car when I had it, and it ran like a top. I loved it, but yeah, I added it into the book kind of as a jab at myself. That's why. I mean, you know, like she says, I believe in the book, you want a convertible or something, you know, and it's just a Yaris.
They hit the highway, and I really love how you have them stop in very specific towns that Californians would know, and a lot of us that drive through them. You know, this very industrial Fontana, you know, Colton and Beaumont, Banning, all those little towns, and they stop and see the scenery. It's
Yeah, that it's sort of like the Van Nuys thing. Or like when you mentioned the L.A. crime novels, I feel like if you want to do something a little new, you want to get to some of those places that you don't see every, you know, in all these. And I'm always fascinated when we did a drive today through some of those spots, and yeah, when I'm on the road, those are the kind of places I always stop and check out and explore a little bit.
Yeah, there's nothing that bothers me more when people say, "Oh yeah, once you leave LA, there's nothing out there until you get to, Phoenix or something." And I'm like, "Well, like the more it looks like there's nothing out there, the more there is to look at."
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about music, and you know, specifically, what's some of the music that informed this book? Were you listening to Sweetheart of the Rodeo?
Yeah, a lot of well, the cover is based on Graham Parsons. He had the nudie. This was kind of his iconic nudie suit. Yeah, the Burrito Brothers, which pops up in the book, and I think they called this the suit that this cover is based on is referred to as the Sistine Chapel of Western wear. Which yeah, but yeah, so a lot of that kind of 70s country. I'm trying to think what else. There's a million sort of Lee Hazelwood is referenced later in the book. But yeah, in general, it was like that. Yeah, Burrito Brothers, Graham Parsons, Doug Saum, Freddie Fender, a lot of those kind of Texas, um, cosmic kind of. I think now they kind of call it like cosmic Americana or something. But yeah, that.
You don't see or hear the name Doug Saum brought up in two programs back to back, but we were just doing I just did a virtual event about Austin Noir, new anthology from Cosmic Books. And I was talking about how I love those weird Texas kind of anarchist oddballs like Rocky Erickson, people like that.
Yeah,
So
Terry Allen's another one.
Terry Allen,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just great songwriters, and just they had that sort of they took kind of the classic country, just kind of more almost psychedelic sort of spin on it.
Right. I saw Terry Allen with this group thing. Did you see that?
I've never seen Terry Allen. I would pay it $200.
It was like with Dave Alvin and Tom Rossable.
Oh man.
At the Rialto Theater in Tucson. That was cool.
Nice.
That was a good gig. Yeah. So any questions?
Did you get a Popeye tattoo?
That's on the list.
Maybe this week we can.
Yeah, I have, as you can tell, I have a very high threshold for what goes on my body, and I think a Detective Popeye would be just the thing.
Are you a Joe Lansdale fan?
Hmm?
Are you a Joe Lansdale fan?
I'm not that familiar with his work. I've read a bunch of his short stories, but not his novels.
Mixes things up the same way, you know. Great. I think he's kind of a national treasure, really, Joe Lansdale.
Mm.
He's cold in July. He did. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's really good.
Yeah, a short story called Godzilla's 12-Step Program. And Tight Little Stitches on a Dead Man's Back, which is just great titles. Anybody else?
Anybody know any tattoo parlors that are open? Maybe not in Scottsdale. Let's do it. Let's go, Mom. Olive oil.
Wow.
Have you seen the Popeye tattoo where it's like he's here and then his arm stretches so that it becomes his actual fist? You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, back to back to the Hammett and Chandler thing just for a minute. Can you? I hate to ask you to articulate what it is about them, but it's interesting, because there are a number of writers that come through here. That question is often asked, and people have strong opinions about it. I mean, I love them both. I think they're both great. And if you read the letters of them, have you guys tried Chandler's letters? I mean, he just bleeds all over the page. Whereas Hammett, it's just the facts. Very terse, as you'd expect, I guess.
Yeah, like he's writing a report. I think for me, that opinion was formed in in my 20s, when I was, new to this style of literature, and also like new to like a lot of different kinds of music. Like when I joined the Navy, I met all kinds of people and got exposed to all kinds of different music. And I kept, there was two things I had in common as I was getting into the music and getting into these books. I wanted it to be a little bit more hardcore. I wanted it to be a little darker, a little bit more violent in the novels, and I wanted the music to be faster and more powerful, like less lyrical and things, which I then like grew to appreciate as I got older. But I think that's where my taste was formed when I was younger, like wanting something to be, like I think like when Metallica's, Master of Puppets came out, I was like, nah, that's too weak for me. I'm done with that. I need something harder now, I don't know why I'm always using the language of drugs to describe my passions, but I feel like that was it. It was like I felt like that it was maybe it was because like both writers, or we were talking about this, are kind of masochistic in the way that what they put their detectives through, right?
I like on your blurb how you reference Charles Willeford. He's a big favorite of all of ours too.
Yeah, he might be my favorite. But on the flip side of the Jim's thing with Chandler is I love them both too, but for me, Chandler's got this romantic sort of thing. It just evokes this Los Angeles that I just dream of. But when I first moved there, I reread all the books and just there's one of those things where you can walk around certain parts of Hollywood and still feel that sort of. And just the writing is so beautiful and it's funny and the the similes, just the descriptions, but it's more just this sort of L.A. this romantic Los Angeles that he evokes that I really respond to.
I think Joe is a bit of a romantic. Like when he booked an Airbnb in the Bukowski court. Like
yeah, we stayed in Bukowski's, next door to Bukowski's bungalow.
Yeah,
and,
right next to.
Yeah, just to soak up some of that old. It's so weird though that now they have the thing. It's like you can't smoke anywhere near the place. They had a 10 p.m. quiet. It was just kind of, it wasn't.
There are only
he would
rules.
have been very. He would not have been. He would have been kicked out probably.
There are only rules, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, what are you both working on now? What are your next projects?
Oh, how much time do we have? I can do this very quickly. I'm writing about a crime novel about 4 English teachers who go on a crime spree in northern Arizona in 1993. Danny was... Yes, you do. We'll talk later. I need you to sign a release. I live with Danny for what, 3 years up in Flagstaff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm working on a sequel to Zig Zag, which I'm excited. I like, but and then when I tried to explain it to Jim today, it unraveled like a cheap, So I realized I had a little more work to do on the plot. Yeah, like where is he going? But no, it is. But yeah, I'm a good ways into it, so I'm hoping to wrap up by the end of the year.
Tell us about it. What does Harry get into?
It goes to Las Vegas. So yeah, that's kind of the action moves to Vegas a bit. So yeah,
Another big city, more desert.
yeah, more desert in between, but.
You go first, Joe. I need to think about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I try with this one. I think it's more just in the characters. It just I tried. I mean, there's some scenarios in the that are just kind of overly they're just overtly comic in the book and scenarios, but in general, I think a lot of the humor comes out in just the way they talk and just the way they sort of relate to each other. And my father has threatened to sue me for some of the one-liners that Harry espouses are straight from his mouth. So, but yeah, I think in my case, a lot of it's the banter and and just trying to get in their heads, be authentic to what those guys are doing and not so much try so hard for the humor.
Yeah, I think Zig Zag is an extremely funny novel, and I don't think you can really describe it without using the word humor. Where I think that's not at the front so much in Make It Stop. And I mean, there is some banter, and it's more kind of a gallows humor, kind of a sarcastic humor. So how do you do that? Well, first you're born into in a house where sarcasm is the love language, and and then you just hold on for dear life. Um, I think if my daughter's watching, she's probably like, mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm, yeah.
Music stuff coming?
Well, I had the paperback version of Corporate Rock Sucks: The Rise and Fall of SST Records is coming out next month, early next month. And SST Records is the label that Black Flag built and then went through. But if you don't know, it is not necessarily a punk label because so many bands, including the Meat Puppets, were on it, and a ton of bands that became synonymous with alternative music in the 80s and into the 90s. Like even Soundgarden had their first album on SST, and just Minutemen, Sonic Youth, Husker Du, so many of the South Bay bands. It just goes on and on and on. And but unfortunately, a lot of those bands did not have the greatest relationship with the label over allegations that they weren't compensated fairly. And so the label is kind of a shell of itself today. So that was a really fun project that I worked on. And I have some other collaborations that I'm working on that, on and off, and that I really can't talk about at the moment. I'll tell you all. I'll tell when we turn the cameras off.
Yeah.
Just real quick, could you guys just talk about your writing process? Is it set times each day, or just feel like it, or later in the day? How do you get into the writing?
Well, one thing we both have in common is that we both have had and have, um, worked in advertising, which is a very deadline-driven kind of thing, and it's not something that you ever like sit around and be like, I hope I get inspired to write this ad copy. It's just do it three, and that kind of thing is very helpful, and is a different style than journalism and things that are more like research and working the phones and talking to people, and which is also good. Both are very collaborative, but anything that kind of like eradicates those romantic ideas you have about writing is good because if you only waited for inspiration to come, then just wouldn't get a lot done. And so um, I write all the time. I keep a journal, which is just a Word doc that I just write a place to talk about, you know, I went on the road with Joe. We had burritos in Tonopah.
Chili relleno burritos, delicious.
And they were delicious. But also like it's like, man, this novel is giving me a hard time. I thought I'd be further along, or wow, holy shit, I got a book review due tomorrow and haven't even thought of the first line. Maybe I'll do this, and the next thing you know, I'm writing the review. I have a place to go that's not like a new blank page every time. So
That sounds familiar to me. I do a
so,
lot of
so
reviewing.
that's kind of what I do. Is just like make the best use of the time and not be too precious about the where and the how and the when. Just do the work.
Yeah, I think I used to be kind of a little more what Jim was describing, where you kind of waiting for the inspiration or being a little more, and I think I have a theory that the reason a lot of the stoner crime novels there aren't that many is because they don't finish them. Yeah. So
Forget about them.
yeah. So I think there's a lot of half-written books, probably half-written zigzags out there that, but no, for me, it didn't really start happening until I started doing what, just the self-imposed, every day as much as or as close to every day as possible. And then I read the interview with Elmore Leonard where he said something, if I didn't set my alarm for 5 o'clock, whatever, back then, I wouldn't be sitting here talking, and so I took that to heart. So now I'm more of a morning guy, and I get it mostly done in the morning because I work from home and I go to the office, but I need like at least I get that hour and a half, 2 hours at least every morning, and then I usually find when it's going, then I'm more likely to stay in it. If I let it sit for even a couple weeks, then it's like starting it all over again. So just trying to at least those little morning sessions keep it, and then once it's going well, I steal away and do, like Jim said, just do it whenever I'm actually excited to get back into it.
It sometimes happens.
It sometimes happens. Yeah. And also, but yeah, like you said, just to dispel, it took for me, I mean, I'm 46, my first book just came out. So it took me a while to get rid of some of those notions of that kind of, whatever you said, the romantic notions of what writing a novel is like, and even just being it torturous and just trying to make it seem like it's a fun and just a regular thing you chip away at every day. So that's
By really good small presses that champion their authors. Schaffner from press from down in Tucson, great small press, and you're with Rare Bird, right? Yeah. How did you both kind of land at those publishers?
Oh, well, Schaffner, I really lucked out. I was going down the, the list of it's not I don't have an agent, so there's not that many presses that accept unagented submissions. So I was really, but I didn't want to do like the fishing with dynamite kind of approach. I really wanted to just kind of approach people that I thought I might have a connection with, and they had books, not really the novels. They had book. I remember they had a book about Route 66. They had a Lee Marvin biography, and then they had a book, I believe, about the Chelsea Hotel in New York. And I was like, oh, okay, these. And so then the big stroke of luck came when I sent it to I submitted a query, and I got an email back from Sean Murphy, the editor, and the day before he had read a piece that I had written in 2008. So I wrote a profile of the writer Rudy Wurlitzer for Arthur Magazine in 2008, and literally he said he had, it was just kind of one of those kismet moments, and so that I think that he probably read my manuscript with a little more interest and sympathy, having and then it's just, yeah, but they've been great. They haven't had a lot of, he did, it was a very good thorough edit, but also they didn't try to change things. He had a lot of input on the cover, and just every step of the way, that's just been really kind of, I don't have any real like battles or horror stories. They've just been really great.
They make a really good looking.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I didn't think they were going to do a hardcover, and they were, yeah, they've really, they've been a real pleasure to work with.
Yeah, and something similar in that I've known Tyson, at Rarebird for years through the LA scene. I used to run a reading series called Vermin on the Mount, and that over the years there were different writers from the press who would be on the series, or I would, through book reviews that I had done, or just being involved in the literary scene in LA, we knew each other, and he was also a big fan of punk rock, so he was familiar with the book I did with Keith Morris, who was the founding vocalist of Black Flag and Circle Jerks, and he was familiar with Bad Religion book. So, and I just think that Rarebird makes really beautiful books. So I was really happy when we were able to make a connection and collaborate on something.
Mm. Schaffner, who was as great as it in a small press too. It kind of invested in the whole long-term thing. They're not expecting it to just come roaring out of the gate and be a big sell. They're very good about like what they call kind of the slow rollout, and the understanding that sometimes a book like this takes some word of mouth and some, which is great. To have that kind of, not to have that pressure on you that, oh, my sales aren't, and not that they don't. It's not like they realize it's a long game.
And you had a question?
Doing anything in the eastern part of the country to tour?
What are you doing in the East?
I was trying out the act over here before I go. Because yeah, I was there. They tried to do some stuff back home, and I live in Massachusetts, and yeah, so I will be doing some stuff there, and then I think when the paperback comes out, I'm going to try to do more of another push. But this lined up well with what Jim was doing, and then I know he's doing some. He can talk about what he's doing soon. But yeah, I'm going to be probably doing that more when the paperback comes out.
Yeah, and I'm going to be going after this out to the Midwest for about 10 days. Hopefully no bookstore is dedicated to crime. So hopefully we'll have a few friendly faces. We'll see.
Well, maybe we should wrap up and have you sign some books for us.
I'd love to. Thank you all very
Thanks,
much.
Everybody online. Yeah. So, you want to stay here? We could move you over to this table.